Awesome. All right. So Mr. Joe Mackey. So Joe brings 20 years of experience to the table working with entrepreneurs. He does his best work with visionary business builders who know that there's more to the game than a strong bottom line. There's a better life that's possible for them and those that matter most to them. Joe serves on the board of directors for EO here in Detroit and the board of the South Oakland Citizens for the Homeless. Graduated from Indiana University and helps his clients to articulate and act on what matters most to them. Lives here in Royal Oak, which is where I'm at, with his wife, Jennifer, and 6 children. How about that? I've known Joe for many years, and like a lot of you, just gotten to know him and learn a ton from him. He's one of the greatest conversationalists, if that makes sense. He asks great questions, so I really appreciate that. And then, Joe and I had a conversation this summer after he had a little health issue, and so when he reached out to talk about it, he's inspired me by talking about it. So I'm really excited for him to share. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Joe Mackey. Joe, let's rock and roll.
All right. Thanks, Coach Bob. Appreciate the introduction and happy to be here with everybody today. And today we come here to celebrate the life of Joe Mackey. That's how I thought my eulogy would start, lying in a hospital bed, thinking it was the end. Certainly changed my perspective on life. And I ask you this question, so when are you going to die? Everybody's got a number rolling around in the back of their head. For me, it was 100. I thought I was going to make it happy and healthy to 100. And almost half of that was almost taken from me last summer in July. I say, imagine feeling like you still have a lot left to accomplish while experiencing your life slipping away in a hospital bed. My first 3 days there, I would call out to the nurses and doctors and say, I am dying right now. I would look down, and this is strange, I know this seems a little weird, but I would look down and I would think that I was seeing my soul leaving my body out of my right thigh. Like, who knew that that's where it was stored? And I would hear this voice in my head right as that would happen. It would say, it's not going to be their story. And when I heard that, I would picture my 6 kids and I would just focus on them. And I would say to myself, they're not going to be the kids that say, I had a great relationship with my dad, but he died when I was young. Then I would picture them and think to myself, if I am thinking that I'm dying, then I must be alive. And if I'm alive in this present moment, then I'm going to be okay. And I just kept focusing on that over and over again. If I can think that I'm alive, then I'm not dead, and then I'm okay. I don't know if anybody's been in the hospital with COVID or know anyone that was, but they make you lie on your stomach for 6 to 8 hours a day. And the first 3 days I was in the hospital, I would focus on a thread in the bed sheet, and I would just sit there and look at the thread, and I would think to myself, man, if I can see that thread, then I'm alive. And right again, when I would feel my life slipping away, I would just go back and focus on that bed sheet and say, as long as I can see that thread, then I'm alive right now, and then I'm okay. So as everybody knows, 2 years ago, we stepped into this global pandemic. And last summer when I got COVID, I got it from my wife and daughters. They were returning from a dance competition in Las Vegas. They didn't know it, but they had picked up the Delta variant. The last couple of days they were there and they came home. I picked them up from the airport and got it. I didn't think I could get COVID because I'd been exposed so many times. I thought I was immune, but the 3 people with the Delta variant just overwhelmed my immune system. And on July 22nd of 2021, I went into the hospital and I was there for 21 days. As I said a minute ago, the first 3 days were very, very difficult and an epic battle for my life where I felt it slipping away and kept fighting to stay alive. Once they sent me home after 21 days, I was 3 to 4 more months still on oxygen at home, not able to leave the house, still trying to recover enough that I could even come to the office or go to a kid's sports game. My experience with COVID initially affected how I run my business. I think back 2 years ago, and I know you probably all do as well, that we went to being remote and doing things a lot differently. When I got COVID and almost died from it, it really affected how I live my life. And that's the thing that I wanted to get to today, was to share with you. There were three things that I really found out uh, from almost dying. And the first one goes back to my childhood. I had a very chaotic and traumatic childhood. My mom was married 5 times, and there was a whole cast of characters, from drug dealers and wife beaters and alcoholics and rageaholics. And we lived in 13 different places from my age 0 to 18. I just found out a year and a half ago that I'm actually not even a Mackey, that when my mom was married to Steve Mackey, she had an affair. And some guy named Randy Parker is my biological dad. So it was kind of crazy. And there's a story that chose me as a child that I was an unlovable mistake. And that's something that I carried with me and really struggled with all of my life. And when I was laying in that hospital bed and my friends found out what had happened in the state I was in, they couldn't come and see me. So they got together, about 40 or 50 people in a group, and they found out where I was in the hospital. And they went in the parking lot with their families, and they made signs, and they stood outside my window and did the wave and held up signs and cheered and jumped up and down and stayed there for a couple of hours. And they would walk around and talk to each other, and then they would go back into doing things to let me know that I was there. And I remember in that moment, for the first time in my life, the story that I was an unlovable mistake was quenched, and I realized that I was lovable. And I sat there thinking, oh my gosh, I had to get all the way here to almost dying to have this type of response, to realize that I actually am lovable for who I am. And that was an absolutely incredible experience. And my wife grabbed all of the signs that they had made and put them all over my hospital room, which was really, really cool. The second thing that I found out when I had that experience is that I can get through anything one moment at a time. In the midst of the greatest crisis in my life, I learned that I don't have any real problems in this present moment. And that if I focus on this present moment and I stay in this present moment, whether it's picturing my children or saying, man, if I can think that I'm dying, I'm actually alive, a thread on a bed sheet, if I can stay in this present moment, then everything is okay. And that really had a really big impact on me. The third thing that I found out from being pretty much out of my personal and professional life for 4 months is that it all went on without me. Being the founder of my business, having 6 children that are all very active and busy at that time between the ages of 11 and 20, I would have thought that had I not been here, my business wouldn't have been able to go on. My family wouldn't have been able to go on. Well, everything happened without me being present. Everything that needed to get done did get done. And I am probably, like a lot of you, an insanely busy person that has a story in my head that there's always more to do than I can humanly accomplish, and that everything and everyone depends on me accomplishing all of it. And I found out that that's not true. And so that was in a way humbling and also refreshing. And so I think about those three things, and here's what I have been doing with those three things. Number one, when somebody's in a crisis situation, I've learned from my experience, don't ask them what I can do for them. So when I was lying in the hospital bed, a lot of very good friends and family and well-meaning, amazing people texted me and said, hey man, I love you. What can I do to help? I was fighting for my life. I had no mental capacity to come up with something. And it would just feel odd anyways. the people that texted me and said, hey, I'm taking dinner to your family on Tuesday. Or another thing, a group of guy friends that I have, they all got together and they decided I wasn't going to eat hospital food for dinner. So for probably 17 or 18 of the nights I was there, it started a couple days in, they went to a local really nice restaurant and bought me dinner and delivered it to the hospital and had the nurses bring it up to me because I couldn't have visitors. And so stuff like that was just amazing. And I realized that asking somebody in a crisis situation what you can do for them actually puts a burden on them when you take action, even if it's just writing a letter or a note or, you know, whatever you do is a blessing. So that was a really, really important thing. Number two, something I had been working on a little bit or started to, but it really did hit me was the present moment and staying focused on the process and what I can do versus being anxious about the outcome. So growing up with the chaos and the poverty and the trauma that I did, I've spent a lot of my life trying to create a present reality that looks so dramatically different than that and make it be what would, you know, be the opposite of that: safe, successful. And I realized that there's a lot of anxiety and there's a lot of intensity and a lot of stress in that versus falling in love with the process and focusing on what I can do and letting the outcomes be what they are. I couldn't control whether or not I was going to live or die laying in that hospital bed, but I could do everything they asked me to do to the best of my ability and just stay in the present moment. And then the third thing is 21 days in a hospital bed. I never would have believed I could do that. And then 3 more months at home doing nothing. I thought a lot about how I focus my time and energy and wanting that to be on things that I love and am great at in alignment with what I value. I really realized that putting a lot of pressure on myself is totally unnecessary. It's not good for me or anybody around me. Busyness can be bad and unnecessary if my energy is in the wrong place. And everything that needs to get done will get done with me or without me. I am not required to be here for stuff to get done. When I really pull back and reflect, I realize that life is very fragile. It's fleeting and it can be gone in a moment. How I engage that reality, or how I think about how can I engage that reality in an invigorating way, not in a fearful way. It's like I may not be here tomorrow, so let's be a light, be engaged today. Thought a lot about how can I become the best version of myself that I was created to be, and not be comparing to others. And then I wrap it up with, you know, I wonder what matters the most to you, and are you living it?
All right, Joe, thank you very much.
Wow.
Yeah. So one of the things, Joe, and I don't know how long this, I'll ask you in a second after other people have Q&A, just how you fought and chose to live, which is amazing. But all right, so let's open it up. Who has questions, thoughts, comments for Joe? Donna, go for it.
Joe, thank you so much, firstly, for sharing in the way that you did. I'm processing a lot of what you said, and there's some similarities in some of your experiences that resemble a lot of mine too, in terms of growing up and how you carry that with you. And so my question is more in alignment with how do you keep these lessons that you learned in front of you? Like, is it a daily thing that you're doing to make sure that you are present? And what does that look like in terms of your rhythm, your flow? What do you do to keep your head and your spirit in that space from those lessons that you learned?
Yeah, thanks, Donna. That's a great question. It's interesting. It transformed clarity breaks for me. So for people who run on EOS, we've been running our company on EOS for a little over 14 years. And Gino Wickman was my implementer 14 years ago before he became world famous. You know, so he pushed me back then to do clarity breaks. I did them infrequently, but they didn't really have as much purpose or meaning or value as they do now. And I really love setting aside that time and resetting and relooking at my values, my vision, my goals, what matters to me, And that is the key. And it's just so rich and powerful and fruitful now, because the reality is so much more, and it's weird. Reality is so much more real. There's a better way to say that, I'm sure. I hope you get what I mean.
Yeah, I
Nice way
do.
to word. Now,
Yeah.
focusing
I'm not-
on the important, not the urgent. I love it. All right,
Yeah.
who else has something for Joe? Oh, come on, everyone's got it all figured
Yeah.
out.
It's the
No.
holding back the tears part probably that people can't talk through. But so Joe, thank you for that. And I think, and Dave just put a powerful part on here from the pandemic of those of us that have lived through it and have maybe oversimplified its impacts just because it's not affecting those around us. So thank you for that. And I want to share something that I was just hit with, and I'm wondering if it would resonate with what you just said, Joe, because you said reality. And it's with my coach has said, fighting reality fails 100% of the time.
Mhm.
So what is always going to be it.
Mhm.
And we can't change that, and we can change our perception. So that was literally something that we shared with each other a couple weeks ago, and it just slammed home to me when you were saying that.
Yeah.
And how minuscule all the, pardon my French, the bullshit around us is.
Yeah. I'm writing that down. Fighting reality fails 100% of the time.
Yep.
That's so awesome.
Right, and I've realized, Cheryl and I've realized that we're not God. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, anyone else have
Yeah.
something? Joe? Yes, Dave.
I'd say hello, everyone. I'm a guest today at Coach
you. Welcome.
Bob. Thank you. And, I'm an estate planning attorney. I've been doing it 30 years. And your story, I can't tell you how many hands I've held. What I took away from it most, which is a testament to you a little bit, Joe, is everything did go on.
Mhm.
There's a lot of people, maybe some people on this call today. I challenge each one of you. If you were Joe, how many of your businesses would survive 4 months without you? And I think that's the call to us as entrepreneurs, right? As visionaries. It's a fresh reflection on how much have we systematized, how much have we become system dependent versus person dependent. So Joe, I think it's a great testament that you had a system dependent company more than you knew.
Yeah.
And it was tested and it prevailed. And I think it's a wake up call to all of us to say, would that be true for all of us?
Yeah.
And what if it was longer? Would it be true?
Yeah.
So,
It was the first thank you card I wrote, was to Gino.
Yeah.
When I, a couple months after I got out, had a lot of time on my hands and just said, hey man, implementing EOS 14 years ago, there's no way, right? Without all of that systems, the processes, the people, the alignment, everything that we built over the last 14 years, the way we built it allowed me to be completely removed from the business unexpectedly for 4 months and everything to move along well.
Yeah, appreciate that, Dave. Yeah, and don't wait for the heart attack or the stroke or the COVID to see if your business can survive. And Donna Murray Brown presented to us probably almost a year ago, where when I did a focus day with her, she told the team that in a year she was taking 2 months off. And so that was a forced way, or not even forced, but an opportunity for the team to say, we have a year and then she's letting go of the vine over that year. So yeah, so it's just something to think about. John, did you have something else?
Well, I was just going to ask, so when are you taking another 2 or 3 or 4 months off?
vertical instead of horizontal.
Yes. Hey, absolutely. That's a good question. It's funny is I'm so freaking focused on where we're going as a business and our core target. I'm so just excited about it. I haven't thought about that, but previous to COVID, I tried to take 1 month off a couple of times, and I probably did it. I would give myself like a 75% grade, but I do want to come back to that and do that. So thanks for saying that, John. I'm going to write that down and think about that as well.
And it's easy to forget about those amazing lessons, I know for me. Anything else for Joe we can think of, or for the group?
Just
Hugh,
practically.
Question.
oh, sorry. So Hugh, Richard, and Becky, real quick.
First off, Joe, thank you for sharing this, and we all love you, man. This is great. And yeah, I would say, you know, what you mentioned, it's more of just comment than a question, but what you said about, you know, when you receive the text messages about, you know, how can I help, that really struck me, because I've been known to do that, and I feel like I'm checking a box and reaching out to someone. So I really appreciate that, Joe. Thank you. So it's just more of a comment, but yeah, this is very meaningful. So
Richard and Becky.
You hit it for me. Thank you for that tip. I've serially done that to people in crisis, and I don't like it. I realized as you said it, I don't like it when people do that to me and I'm in crisis. So that practical tip of just taking action and blessing them was gold. Thank you so much, Joe, for what you shared.
Awesome. All right, Becky.
Joe, I'm interested. You talked a little bit around some things you started doing on the clarity break side. Did this experience lead you to stop doing anything?
Great question.
Yeah, it did stop worrying about outcomes. You know, that would probably be the biggest thing, and just focus more and fall in love with the process. Like I use my core target, which we've got for 2030, and I feel a tremendous amount of happy, free, excited energy around our core target, where before this I felt like anxiety, like I have to achieve that to be okay. And now I'm like, this is gonna be really freaking cool. You know, if we do something anywhere near that, that'll be awesome. Right. So I've the anxiety, fear, worry, I have to succeed and accomplish to have value, has gone away. I'm thinking about, is there any, if you're asking, are there any like literal practical things I stopped doing? No, because I love all the things I do in terms of how I live my life for the most part, most of the time.
Awesome. All right. Anything else for Joe before we go into breakouts? So I had one last thing, Joe. When you and I have had many discussions around this, what I heard you say when they were calling for you to do the ventilator, I heard you tell me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're like, no, I'm going to fight you, and fight to stay alive. I just think that was one of the biggest takeaways. So if you could explain that really quick, because I mean, to me, and again, I had a situation back in August, which I shared with a lot of people, where I feel like I made a choice to live. Yeah. So just share that real quick. Yeah.
So when I first got to the hospital, my oxygen saturation was 75% in my blood. I don't know if anybody knows, 98 it's supposed to be, right, or higher. 75, you're dying. So they throw everything at me, steroids, a couple of drugs, and the maximum amount of oxygen they can put through your nose, 100%. And I only got up to like mid 80s. And so then they say, hey, you got to be at 88 to stay in this room and be okay. And you're not. And so we're going to take you to ICU and ventilate you. And right when they said that, there was this, I'm not a doctor. I don't have any reason except, this very powerful force inside of me was screaming no, that if they took me to ICU and sedated me and ventilated me, really the sedating part, that I would die, that the only thing keeping me alive was my extreme will and desire to live. And so then I said, no, I'll fight you. And they were like, and they him and hawed, and the two doctors and a nurse, and they thought, oh, you'll give, they came back second day. And that's when I was really deep in the weeds, and I was dying, like it was over, everything. And they said, okay, you're going, this is not getting better. And again, I said, no. They came back the third morning, and things had not gotten better. I was getting worse. And they said, okay, we're going to come back in a couple hours, and we're going to sedate you in the room and take you to ICU so you can't fight us. I couldn't have fought him anyways. I was in such bad shape. And I grabbed my IV and I pulled away, and I go, no, I'll fight you. And I just had this really clear vision that sedating me was taking my will away, and then I would die. And then they came back to take me to ICU and sedate me. And I went from like 85 to 88 on my oxygen saturation. And they shook their heads and were like, man, you were just like right under the wire. And we'll let you stay. And then that was the first 3 days. For 7 days, I stayed right around 88, 89, barely hanging on to staying in the room. And then on the 10th day, I had a big improvement and then had kind of a steady growth from there. But yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that, because I just find when I am stressed and I'm busy and I'm doing urgent things, I'm not fighting to live. I'm just, going through my day. So that really touched me. So thank you for sharing that conviction to live. So,
Yeah.
all right, Joe, thank you very much. Appreciate your courage to share. That's awesome. Thank you. That's very inspiring. All right. So